Welcome to game 3. So 2 games played so far. You have 2 points out of 2. So we went into game 3 playing as white against Mr. Clinton Fomevor. A very strong and very fast, quickly developing player. He's gained like 120 rating points over the past year or something crazy like that, and he's still quite a bit underrated. So I was playing on the white side. This was the second game of the second day of play. And I started 1d4. So I prepared 1d4 for this tournament. But funny story. So I played him as white also last year's nationals. And in that game I played 1e4. And we played this Sicilian. And I'd seen that he'd prepared a Caracan for this tournament because in one of the first 2 games he had played a Caracan against 1e4. But I wasn't going to play 1e4. I was going to play 1d4. And he had seen that I had played 1d4 in the first game. So he was preparing against 1d4. And I just passed the random comment. We were talking before the game. And I went like, I'd seen that you prepared a Caracan for this tournament. I can't wait to show you some of what I prepared against it. Suggesting to him that I was going to play 1e4. And it kind of worked. He told me after the game that he was looking at those lines after 1e4. But yeah, probably didn't matter all too much because of the way the game went, but it was just a little funny thing that happened before the game. So I started d4, he went d5, c4, e6, knight f3, knight f6, knight c3, a typical queen's gambit decline type position. I continued bishop f4, he castled, and I played e3. And here is where he really has to decide how he wants the game to continue. He played for the immediate c5, which is a very solid, strong. It strikes back in the center immediately. It doesn't give white too much opportunity to grab space here on the queen side, so it's kind of attempts to equalize. So of course there are still a few practical issues that you need to solve. And I went for this variation with d takes c5, where I play a3 and I prioritize development. I'm always studying to play this b4, and I want to bring my pieces out quickly and castle basically. So I kind of delay bringing out my dark square bishop because, as expected, he's probably going to take on c4 at some point, which he does immediately. And here he has the option of trading queens and going into an endgame, but I should be slightly better in that endgame, mainly because he has this bishop on c8 that is stuck behind the pawn on e6, whereas all my pieces are at least for now are out. So but then he decided to go a6, which is actually the main book move. And after I replied queen c2, this is where he deviated from the book a bit. The main move played here is b5, going for the immediate activity, bringing out your pieces and allowing your bishop to come out to b7, and then your rook can join the action. He decided to play queen e7, which makes sense because my move queen c2 suggests I want to put a rook on the d file. So queen e7 looks a bit natural, but it allows me to grab a bit of initiative. So I played rook d1, he played rook d8, and then I castled. Developed with knight c6, and here we see the problem. I've completed development, all my pieces are out, they all look fine, but he still has this problem of the c8 bishop, and because he didn't go b5 early on, it's still not too obvious how the bishop will get active. And more importantly, before the bishop gets active, I can strike. So I see an opportunity to take over the d file, right? Because now that his rooks are not connected, I can take once on the d file, queen takes back, and then I win the file. And at least for now, I have control of the file. Before he figures out how to get this bishop out to contest me on the file, I can try and get some sort of advantage. So this was my idea. So I took on d8, the queen took back, I played rook d1. And again, there's a few practical difficulties. It's still not too bad, but black needs to solve a few problems. Right now, the queen wants to stay on this diagonal, right? I mean, doesn't have access to the c7 square, and b6 it seems silly because of knight a4. A5 is also silly. But then the problem is if he goes east to queen e7, which is the most natural square because e7 is a bit more active than f8. The point is I go b4, and the bishop cannot stay on this diagonal, and so the bishop has to go back probably here, and then my bishop gets into d6 with tempo, and it looks a bit very uncomfortable because your bishop is still not come out yet, and now I have a very annoying looking piece. I mean, seeing this from afar, it's something that you probably will want to avoid. And so his idea was that he goes queen f8 instead. The point being that if I go b4, this time he can come back to e7. So he reserves the e7 square for the bishop so that I don't get my bishop in. So you put the queen on f8, but again, f8 is not really where you would love the queen to be. You definitely prefer the queen to be on e7. The point is that it prepares a well-timed e5 at some point, which is one of the moves you want to play to try and free up your position here. So after forcing the queen to this less than ideal square, I decided my best chances were to try and take over in the center. So I continued with e4 because again, the structure is quite symmetrical, right? And so my only advantage really is that this piece is not that great. But then again, he has b5 coming in, bishop b7, and he'll equalize on that front. So I need to try and, with the initiative that I have right now, get some other kind of advantage in the position before he gets the opportunity to regroup. So I decided to go e4, with the point being that even if he manages to get his bishop out, I'll get a superior pawn structure. I can get my pawn into e5, and then I get some realistic attacking chances down this king side. So he played for b5 immediately, and I put my bishop on d3, threatening very seriously, I might add, to just push this pawn to e5 and win the h7 pawn, because the knight will have to move, and then I win the h7 pawn for nothing, which I thought was a fairly serious threat. I thought he would be forced to respond with either a g6 or an h6, but somehow he just ignored the threat and he played bishop b7. And in the game, I thought it was very strange because I mean it's obvious that's what I want to do. And I'm not sure exactly what line he calculated that made him think it was okay, but yeah, it definitely wasn't. So I leapt at the chance. I played e5. The knight came to h5. I took the pawn on h7 with checking h8, and this is where the game starts to get crazy. So here, I mean, before I play e5, I have to calculate all this, right? And I had to decide between putting a bishop on g5 and coming all the way back to c1. They both looked good. To be honest, at this point, I felt like the position was winning regardless which of them I chose. And I saw many interesting lines, like, because if I go here, if he allows my bishop to come back, he's just lost the pawn, right? So the critical variation always has to be g6. And then I thought I take, and then I do this, and I'm threatening to do this. And it's not so easy to stop this move, bishop f6. Especially because I'm hitting the knight, so the knight does have to move and leave the square. The knight moves anyway, I play bishop f6. So I thought the best move would be like something ugly like this, but then after bishop f6 anyways, with knight g5 coming, I thought this has to be winning. And I mean, indeed it is. And it was probably better to go for bishop g5. But I also thought bishop c1 was winning, because in those lines too, I thought I was just doing very well. And the reason why I chose to go with bishop c1 instead was because in some of the lines I wanted to reserve the g5 square for my knight. Exactly. So you realize that my knight, he's going to play g6, I'm going to sack. This was my reason, right? So my queen is going to be here, it's going to hit the knight. So the question is, do I want my bishop in that position on that square or not? And my answer was I probably don't, because I really want to play knight g5. Knight g5 is like it wins the position in a lot of these in lots of those lines, because then you threaten checkmate on a7 and you threaten knight f7, which also checkmate, so you win the queen in lots of variations. So I thought, yeah, rather than put the bishop there, let me bring the bishop back to c1, which is also fine, and bishop g5 was better, but both of them should win. And then he did play g6, but here apparently there's something just much better than taking. Taking is also fine, it's still better for white, but and I didn't even consider this, which is a bit annoying. Maybe I should have. But rook d7 is apparently extremely strong here. And I mean, you hit the bishop. But more importantly, you protect your bishop, right? You protect it tactically. Because the point of g6 is that he's threatening to take the bishop. But after any king takes, you take on f7 and you win the queen. And so he can actually never take the bishop. And you land on d7 tempo. So even anything like this, you just even go here and you just keep your rook on the 7th. And you ask him why he's giving you all of this. So it's a very annoying move that I should have at least considered, I feel. But I was a bit too bent on just taking. And the lines looked good. That's like, it's very tempting when you see something that's good to just play it without looking for something that may be even better. Although to be fair, I probably wouldn't have played this even if I had seen it, because I did think I had miscalculated a bit at the end of the line. So I did think bishop g6 was just completely winning in all lines, which in retrospect is a bit, yeah, it's a bit funny, but what can you do? So even here I think rook d7 was still the best, but I just took on g6, and I don't see how I missed this move. But queen f5 just holds, because he hits my queen, defends the knight, and there's no time for me to bring any of my other pieces into the game. And yeah, for some reason I missed this. I saw queen f5 in many other lines, but not immediately in this particular line. And here it just kind of shuts down the attack. So we would have to play an endgame. We have given up a piece for some pawns. So I have some pass pawns, but I'm also down a piece, so it would be an interesting endgame there. But he also missed queen f5, and he played his knight into f4. The knight was hit, and f4 looks like it gets tempo. And in my calculations from like 5 moves ago, before I played e5, I saw this position and I thought it has to lose because I take, queen takes, and I played knight g5. And I'm threatening checkmate on h7, and I'm threatening knight f7. There's no way to stop all those threats. Now I saw that he had queen f2 because his bishop is also attacking on f2. But after queen f2, king h1, I thought there's nothing. I win. He resigns. So when he played knight f4, I felt very confident. And I didn't calculate the line again. And this is something that I've noticed I need to improve from my games. You make calculations from afar, right? You have to. But then whenever you get to the position that you've calculated before, so it's important to take a look at it again, because there's many things that you might miss when you are looking at positions 3-4 moves in advance that you definitely won't miss if you look at them afresh. But it's a bit of laziness, and it's a bit of I've looked at this like 10 minutes ago. Why do I need to look at it again? And calculation can be annoying, can be tough. Sometimes if you feel you are sure about the evaluation, you don't really want to waste time calculating it again. And that's what happened here. So I just took without looking at anything. Queen g4 is probably the best move. I just hit the knight again, and the knight has to move. And I'm still going to play the same knight g5 afterwards, and his king is still going to die. But the difference is I don't allow a very important variation. So after bishop f4 and queen f4, again, if I had taken the time to calculate, I would have seen that I can't play knight g5, and I would have continued with something like rook d7, which again still wins without too much difficulty. But yeah, what can you do? So at this point, I was confident. I thought the game is over after knight g5, so I was walking around watching other games. And when he played queen f4, I came to sit down and make the move knight g5, and then go and walk around, watch other games. I'm confident the game is over. He plays queen f2. I come, yeah. I put my king on h1. I'm getting up to go, and I expect him to think for a bit here and resign, because like it looks like there is no move. And just as I'm about to get up, my man reaches for his queen, and I'm like, you're not supposed to have any queen move. What move is he going to make? I expected him to resign. And the man takes the queen and takes on g2. And I go like, oof. I didn't actually say oof in my head, but yeah. And what to say? And I wouldn't have missed this idea if I'd taken like 2 minutes even in this position to look at the position. Even before knight g5, I would have spotted this. But at least after queen f2, I would have seen it. Although now there's not much I can do about it. But yeah, queen g2 solves all his issues. Of course, the point is that after king takes, he has knight takes e5 with a discovered check by the bishop on b7, and the knight that just took on e5 is hitting my queen, so he gets the queen back. He's won like 3 pawns in exchange for the queen, and yeah, it was really, really bad. It's not something I should have missed again. So like, any of these moves before would have won. Queen g4 here would have won, and after even takes rook d7 here should have won. I think knight e2 is also like very strong, hitting the queen. Yeah, but it's basically laziness. I don't think there's much more to it. I didn't take the time to calculate because I felt I had calculated it, and there was no point looking at the same lines again. And it happened more than once, not just in this game, in a few other positions, and it's something that I do need to work on if I want to improve on my results. So takes king takes is forced, knight takes e5, and now he's actually up a piece, right? So I have to play queen e5 so that he has to take, and I win at least the piece back, and material is equal, which is what happened. And I took back with the knight, and we have an end game where material is equal. He has a bishop and knight versus my 2 knights. I have an h pawn versus his e pawn, and we both have a rook. And he should hold this endgame with correct play, of course. But again, for some reason, and again, this is some theme that's repeated itself a lot this tournament. my man, after playing, arguably so well to hold that position, immediately blundered. And there are many moves to make here. The simplest is just bishop. I mean, the bishop is hit by my knight. That's like the point. So the bishop probably should just drop back to e7, and he's doing fine. I can pretend to win this pawn, but I don't think it gives me all that much. He goes like a rook g8, and my king doesn't have all too many squares, and he can hold the ending, especially because he has this bishop. If it were double knight versus double knight, being up a pawn would have been more of a big deal, but with the bishop you can easily carry out the pawn and then at the same time attack some of my queenside pawns. So it should still be holdable. But my man decided to try something a bit too clever, right? He played knight c4. The point is that he's threatening to fork my king and rook. And so he's arguing that he gets tempo, that I can't take here because of this, right? Which is correct, but I can move my rook out of the way, which he didn't take time to consider. And the second problem is that his king is actually not too safe, and after the move I played with d7, his king is actually in the mating net, and because the rook controls, the knight controls the square, and this knight is heading into f6 to control that square, and my rook controls all these squares, and I mean it's easy for you to see how the king gets mated. So the sequence is rook h7 check, the king has to come here, knight f6 will come with check, the king has to go here, and then rook f7 will be checkmate. And so the position is just lost, and the bishop cannot move away to defend those threats, and so he has to, if he defends against the checkmate, I win the bishop for free basically, and if he tries to defend the bishop, I checkmate. So he just dropped the piece for nothing. And it's funny because immediately after he was fine, he blundered, which is something that actually happens quite often, I noticed, because whenever you get that freeing of the position, whenever you need to switch your mindset from I'm losing, I need to defend, to this is actually level, I can play, whenever the evaluation of a position swings wildly like that, is when people are most susceptible to blundering. And this is unfortunate, but there's just no way back from here. And so he played bishop e3. I don't think he had seen that it's mate. He just probably didn't want to defend, because I mean, if you want to defend, you can. You play something like rook a7, and then I just win material, and then you try and hold this endgame. But it's a bit depressing. This version actually isn't too bad because you do actually win a lot of pawns, and because I can't save this guy is the problem. I guess I'll take this one, and it might still probably doesn't win, does it? But anyways, there's a better sequence after rook a7. You check here first, of course, and then you take the piece, and you don't allow any of that stuff. I guess you can even take with check and then take. But anyways, he played bishop e3 and gave up checkmate in 3, which I duly delivered, and I had won the third game. So yeah, kind of a mixed feelings kind of game. I did not play well again. It's it would have been better if he defended very well and managed to find like the only path to holding the position. I'm sure I would have felt better about it, but when it's just down to you being too lazy to look at lines that you should look at when you are winning, it's not all that great. So I mean, it was a win, but yeah, I didn't feel too great about it. And it's actually again a theme that repeated itself in this tournament. Like they say, to win strong tournaments like this, I mean, it's good to be prepared, but I also do need to be very, very fortunate. And not just this game, a couple of other games, you realize it just came down to very small margins that and a lot of fortune going my way. So yeah, of course I was happy with it. This was the third win in a row, and yeah, the next game would be extremely important. Would be the game against the former national champion, #1 rated FIDE Master Hasford, and I really look forward to coming your way with that game soon. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you haven't, leave a comment, drop a like. Happy chessing, and I'll see you later.